Here are some facts about Lyme disease that you probably didn't know. Number one, this one's pretty crazy. So most of us with Lyme disease have what are called eye floaters, which means that we see shapes in our vision, a bit like a hallucination, but it's not quite the same. For me, mine looks like frog spawn. They're like a group of circles with dots in the middle. And I did think that it was kind of like a hallucination, that it was just something that I could see. But I had a optician's appointment a few weeks ago now, like over a month ago, and I told him about these floaters and that I have Lyme disease, and so he got one of his machine thingies and looked into my eyes, and guess what? He could see them. So they're not just in my vision, they are in my eyeball, and he can see them on his machine. I was absolutely gobsmacked. I could not believe it. I felt so weirdly validated. He was just looking at my eye and he was like, oh yeah, I can see them. And I was like, wait. Number two, the quicker that you get treated for Lyme disease, the best results you'll have. So for example, I'm in a Lyme disease Facebook group and someone said that within 3 weeks of having a tick bite, they were put on antibiotics and they had a very, very quick recovery. Whereas for people like me, where it goes on undiscovered for like 10 years, it's much harder and the treatment is so much more intense and it takes so much longer to get to remission. And it leaves long-lasting effects. So Lyme disease also causes tinnitus, which is like constant ringing in the ears. Sometimes it sounds like a really high-pitched noise. Sometimes I often get like the noise of being underwater with like a sort of humming tone. That's like a really big symptom of Lyme disease. It's whoop, 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 like most of us have it. And I was told by my Lyme doctor that for some reason it's nearly always the very last symptom to go, which is weird and kind of interesting. Did you know that when you get bitten by a tick, they actually release like a numbing agent so you don't feel it? Tick bites are usually not itchy, not painful, so most people don't have a clue that they've been bitten, like me. This is why it can take so long to get a diagnosis, because you just don't know that it's happened. And 1 out of 3 people with Lyme disease don't get the classic what's called a bullseye rash, which is a red ring around the tick bite. Which is quite unfortunate really, because it's usually the bullseye rash that gives it away and people get put on antibiotics straight away. Like my dad, it happened to him probably about 9 years ago now. He was put on antibiotics straight away and he recovered, whereas I was bitten, had no rash, nothing, and it wasn't discovered till 9 or 10 years later. This is a really, really awful one, but did you know that the suicide rates with Lyme disease are extremely high? Whether this be to someone being left undiagnosed, they didn't even know that they had it, whoop, 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 or just the intensity of Lyme disease symptoms. I think people think that you just feel a little bit ill, but Lyme disease is a monster and it does take lives. Lyme disease can cause really severe psychiatric issues, and if that goes untreated, it can be deadly. It can take someone's life. I've been in that place and I thankfully came out of it, whoop, 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 but a lot of people aren't that fortunate. You can be bitten by a tick but not show Lyme disease symptoms for weeks or months afterwards. It doesn't just always happen straight away. There are different types of ticks, and not every single tick in the world will carry Borrelia, which is the Lyme disease bacteria, but there is a type of tick called the nymph tick, which is as small as a poppy seed, so you wouldn't know if you were bitten by it. Lyme disease has a well-known nickname called the Great Imitator because it can mimic so many other conditions, which is why a lot of people, it takes a long time to get diagnosed unless you have the rash. It can mimic things like Alzheimer's, fibromyalgia, depression, anxiety, Parkinson's, like so many things. People very rarely have Lyme disease on its own. Lyme disease has many, many co-infections that fall under the Lyme disease umbrella. So say that like Lyme disease is here. Under the umbrella you have Mycoplasma, Bartonella, Babesia, Rickettsia, Ehrlichia, like so many. I've somehow managed to tick them all off the list. It's quite impressive. Do not be fooled into thinking you don't have many ticks in your area, because ticks are pretty much everywhere. Do not think that you are safe, because you're probably not. Not to scare you, but there are precautions you can take. Lyme disease tests often produce false negatives. This means that the tests aren't always fully reliable, even if you pay a lot of money to get a test. For example, one test that I had, which confirmed the Lyme disease, it was quite a high number. It was like a significant amount, well over the positive mark. But then another test I had showed that it was negative, which is obviously a false negative. So it's not always fully reliable. They sometimes diagnose you based on symptoms rather than what the blood shows, because there's not many reliable tests for it. I hope you learnt something about Lyme disease. It's so much more than what you think it is.